Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny squared.
with the Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And we have got a lot to go into today. This is where we have conversations at the intersection of sports and faith. Kenny, you know I shed a few tears yesterday. We've got two big news stories here in New York, right? Edwin Diaz.
Oh man, I feel bad for those that are Dominican and Mets fans because it's like
Oh,
heartbreak after heartbreak.
we'll get into it. And Aaron Rodgers, the saga continues. We'll get into that, although I'm going to take him off the hook a little bit. The tournament started yesterday, and already we've got some bracket busting things happening. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, that's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, yeah. One of your favorite announcers, Jim Nance. Also, we'll get into him and what's happening with him this tournament. And John Morant, they handed down suspension. We'll get a little bit into that. And you've got an interesting story on Diamond Sports and Valley Sports that we'll get into that could affect us, in the baseball season. And do you have some inspiration today? I hope you have some inspiration.
Oh yeah, mine is WBC themed. World Baseball Classic.
Okay. All right. Mine is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So we'll talk a little bit about him as well. All right. You ready to get this going?
Let's get into it.
All right. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny and
Kenny squared
with Sports on the Positive Tip podcast. And Kenny, first of all, everybody listening, happy birthday to you. Today's your birthday. You wearing the green. Yeah, you got the green going. You got the St. Patrick's theme happening. A little Snoopy. Looks great. How you doing? Everything good?
Yeah, everything's good. Thanks. Yeah, we rocking the Snoopy theme today. So, but yeah. And as always, my birthday, the weather is kind of crazy here. It's 50 now, and they say it's going to be 25 at the end of the day, so that's great.
Yeah, we'll share this real quick with the audience, but you and I don't know if it was exactly your birthday, but we went to see the Knicks, remember? That Saturday night with Nick, with our friend, your best buddy Nick, and we come out really late. We go in and the weather is probably around 60 degrees, 65 degrees and nice. So we didn't, listen to the forecast like we should have. By the time we came out, and I don't know, did that game go into overtime? Was that against Portland and Nate Robinson brought them back and then they wound up losing in overtime? So the game lasted a little bit later. It was a great game, if I remember right. But the Knicks weren't good back then. These are the Isaiah Thomas years, if I remember right. And And so we come out and it is starting to get cold. We're like, oh my gosh. But the car's not parked far away like a knucklehead. I park on the in the street. And as we're walking towards it, Nick looks, it was a rental car. And Nick looks and he says, is that our car? And I was like, what? No, it can't be. And he grabs the keys from me and he goes, yes, it is. It's our car. And we have no idea where it's going. Where it got towed away. I guess I was parked in the wrong spot. And that night, I remember walking to the west, all the way. It was all the way on the west side of Manhattan, and we had to walk there, and we're freezing because the wind is whipping now from the water. And the temperature must have dropped down into the 30s and 20s, and with the wind, just in those few hours, that's how weird March weather could be. But that turned into what turned into a great night, turned into like a long night because I think I had to pay like $300 to get the car, dude. But anyway, I want to start with these two New York stories, big stories in New York as well as in baseball. And I'm teasing, but I did come close to crying yesterday because I do think that the most important Met is Edwin Diaz. And it's no coincidence that in his third year with the team, he really turned the corner last year. And not only did he become a fan favorite when Edwin Diaz at times was getting booed in his first couple of years here, but he turned it on, man. I mean, he had shown some signs of greatness those first couple of years. And by the way, did you know in Seattle, his last year there, he saved 57 games out of 62 opportunities? I mean, he had just this unbelievable year. And
wow.
the Mariners was so desperate to get rid of Robinson Cano's contract that they threw him into the trade. And but I jotted down his numbers from last year, and one of them is just going to blow you away. He was 3-1, and he had 32 saves, which is great. It didn't lead the league in saves or anything, but here's the stat that blew me away. He pitched 62 innings. He had 118 strikeouts in
Wow.
62 innings. And so there were times where he was just unhittable last year. And I believe he blew only 4 saves last year, which, was certainly down from his first couple of years with the Mets. And you and I know this. We've seen this over the years, how devastating it can be to a team when you take a 2 or 3 run lead into the ninth inning and you don't have a good closer and the bullpen loses it. That's so devastating for a team, man. So deflating. And he just, I think he was such a big part of why the Mets won 101 games last year. So he gets hurt in the World Baseball Classic, celebrating of all things. And I'm not laughing about that. It's just so ironic. So first, I want to hear your thoughts. So obviously, I'm really disappointed. I think the Mets will have a plan. They do have David Robertson on the roster, and then there's Zach Britton is out there. There's a couple of players that they can maybe go after and sign as kind of a fill-in, but he's gone for the year. It looks like, right? I don't think there's any hope of him coming back this year. Well, he has a torn meniscus or something like that in
Yeah,
his knee,
torn patellar tendon.
patella tendon. So I want to get your take now. I'll shut up because everybody knows my take as a Met fan, right? So enough of that. But your take on the WBC as a whole, and I don't think we've seen a few injuries over the years. You could probably talk about that more than me, but this is a biggie. And you had some suggestions. I think Max Scherzer had a few suggestions, but you also had your own thoughts. So I'll keep quiet. What's your overall thing first on the Diaz injury? How the Mets fill in, but then give me a whole rundown here on the WBC because I haven't watched much, of it. And how can we prevent some of these injuries? I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the Mets here. I think it is very devastating because kind of like what you said, you always know those games where like you kind of feel like, yes, you have a lead in the ninth inning, but you're also like, man, this lead is not going to last in the ninth inning. Even when you have like a shutdown guy like an Edwin Diaz, or think of like back in the day, well, not really Mariano because he's like upper echelon, but even like there were times like Aroldis Chapman, like you knew when he's walking the first guy and it's 3-0 on the next guy, it's like, oh well, we're losing this game. And it's just like heartbreaking and you're like, oh man. Especially like those games where you come back and you take the lead. It can be very devastating. I do think that, especially with bullpen, I do think Edwin Diaz is their best bullpen piece. However, sometimes bullpens can be very fluid. Like, take I look at the Yankees last year. At the beginning of the year, you're like, Aroldis Chapman's the lockdown closer, like that's his role. But when it came to about mid-May and you saw Clay Holmes dominating and Chapman got hurt, like Clay Holmes just kind of took that by the horns. But then, of course, he gets hurt and starts to struggle towards the end of the year. And then it kind of became like the bullpen by committee. Wandy Peralta closing a few games, Jonathan Loizaga. So I think that the Mets will be fine in that way. I do think someone will rise to the top if it's like May or June to be like that closer. David Robertson has done that. He closed out a couple World Series games, and playoff games. So like, and also obviously like he came from the Yankees system, was backing up Mariano, had a couple years where he was a closer there, Chicago, other places. So I think Robertson could do that. Adam Ottavino's closed games out before. I do think that they probably need another guy out there. I think Zach Britton would be perfect. I know his tenure with Buck wasn't the best ending, but I think I don't think that's going to affect him that much. Also, Zach Britton's probably just looking to try to get back into the league at this point.
Right.
So I think Zach Britton would be like a good option, probably more for like the 7th or 8th inning as opposed to closing. However, he does have closing experience. He went, I think it was like 54 of 54 back in 2016. He had like a 0.5 ERA. Like the guy is a good closer, and especially if like post his I think it was Tommy John surgery, if I remember, if he if he has like that devastating sinker, no
Mhm.
one's hitting him.
Yeah.
So especially
Yeah.
with that Mets defense,
Yeah.
they'll be fine.
Yeah.
World Baseball Classic. The other big injury that I can think of during a WBC was Mark Teixeira. I want to say this would be like 2012
Uh-huh.
ish. And this wasn't even in a game. In a practice, he tore his wrist, tore a tendon in his wrist, and tried to come back. Came back for like a couple games, but then was just out for the year. So like that happened, and I see like a lot of people saying like, oh well, baseball shouldn't send their or Major League Baseball players shouldn't send the players there because they'll just get hurt. But like this is, I believe, the 5th WBC, and we're talking about 2 like major injuries to stars.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
I can't think of another one. Although there are some people that have said like people that play in the WBC end up struggling throughout the regular season. I don't know how much of a. I feel like that's kind of a little bit cherry picking. I feel like you can look at really anyone. There's probably people on both sides that do really well and some that
Oh
struggle.
yeah. Yeah.
Max Scherzer had suggested pushing it back into like the summertime.
Yeah.
I don't think that would necessarily work because like especially like think of how especially starting pitchers really love that rhythm of pitching every 5 days.
Yeah.
Like I think of Garrett Cole, who's really like that. Max Scherzer is probably also very like that. And like, yeah, you would love to have like a Max Scherzer go 7 innings as opposed to 4 innings under like the pitch count limits and everything like that they have. But I think the way that they have it works out best for everyone.
Yeah.
Because like there's not really any other leagues going on, so you don't have to like pause anything. And also like they do use a lot of different stadiums. Like they're in Miami, they were in Phoenix. Like
Uh-huh.
I believe they're doing the championship in LA if I'm not mistaken, or they have done it in LA before. So like I think it would just work out better the way that they have it right now.
Yeah.
And like it's some of those games have been really exciting.
I was
I
gonna
haven't
say,
caught a
yeah,
ton.
it's a great event. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, like, I feel like here in the U.S., everyone's just like, whatever. But like some of like the Dominican Republic team, like people were devastated that they lost.
Yeah.
Also,
Yeah.
they were probably the most hyped team, maybe outside of Japan.
Yeah.
But like they got like all the big stars. You got Julio Rodriguez, you got Juan Soto, you got Manny Machado. You had a lot of star power on that team. I believe Jose Ramirez is kind of a bench player, and
Yeah.
he's
It's
arguably a
amazing,
top
right?
5 player.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So like I think there's a lot of passion behind it. I think people love the WBC. So I don't think this will stop people. I'm gonna give credit to Chris Rose here. I heard him talking about it. He had actually tweeted out that like this stuff happens. Paul George back in 2012 or something like that broke his leg at a USA event.
Yeah.
Not only did that not stop players from attending, but Paul George 2 years later participated in the Olympics.
Right.
So like
right.
yeah, devastating injuries happen, and I think what a lot of people aren't really fully grasping here is this wasn't an injury based on like him throwing too hard and throwing 101 and blowing out
Yeah.
his elbow. Like this was a celebration. And
I
like
know.
it's just like a freak accident. Like
Yeah.
someone also brought up Mariano Rivera. He tore his ACL like his second to last year, shagging fly balls during batting practice.
Yeah.
Like freak accidents happen all the time. Yoenis Cespedes, like falling in that hole or whatever he did. Like stuff happens, and I know a lot of people like to take shots at the WBC. I like it. It's really exciting. I think it's a lot of fun to watch some of these.
Yeah.
Also, like some of the stuff that like you can't do in Major League Baseball. Like they were doing shifts. Like that's gonna be a thing in the past now.
Yeah.
I saw Gleyber Torres sporting a beard, which I thought was kind of
He's gonna have to shave. Yeah.
Yeah. So I get it. And it is devastating for the Mets. I don't think it completely kills their title chances, but like they do need to figure out who's going to be closing the games in the 9th inning. I know because Aaron Boone loves to say, "Oh, well, closer by committee." Like I don't think that works. You look at Houston, they had a solid 7, 8, 9. You
Yeah.
look at Atlanta the year before, they had a solid 7, 8, 9. Like when you have those guys in place, the game just becomes shorter, especially when you have Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. Like think about like a 5-game series where you have those two guys, and then you could say, let's assume Zach Britton goes to the Mets. So you got Britton, Robertson, Ottavino. Like
Yeah.
boom.
Yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a Yankee lineup from like 5 years
Yeah,
ago.
well,
So
that's right. All that's ex-Yankees. Um, Let me ask you this because I don't know, and probably a lot of people listening may not know. How much influence does the actual team have? So let's just take I'm Edwin Diaz. Do I have to go to the Mets and say, hey, I'd like to play in a WBC? I know that there was someone for the Mets. I'm forgetting. He was a pitcher that they picked up. That they brought him back home right away when he had like a little bit of discomfort or something like that, and he wasn't pitching for the USA. But how much influence does a major league team have any influence at all?
they do. Actually, in that happened with the Yankees this year. Luis Severino wanted to play
Yes.
for the Dominican Republic, and Brian Cashman said no. And I completely support that because the guy hasn't been healthy since 2018,
Right.
2019, something like that. So the teams can say no to them. I think if a player was like, well, forget you and I do it anyway, then there could be a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the teams do have influence because like they're still under contract. Like Edwin Diaz became the richest relief pitcher in Major League history.
Yeah.
Like if Steve Cohen and company really wanted him to not play in the WBC, they could have said so.
Right.
But like most guys are like, hey, go support your country, go
Yeah.
represent.
Yeah.
Because like you hope that something like this doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking like I said, 2 major injuries for and this is like the
Yeah.
5th World Baseball Classic.
It is a great event. They're filling these stadiums up. They're selling out. It is a great event. It's a lot of pride, especially for some of the other countries. And I think the U.S. Team is stacked as well with Mike Trout and everybody. But boy, oh boy, you just hate to see this injury, but it's a fluke injury. It happens during a celebration, which is so odd. And that has happened a few times over here. I think you brought up Kendry Morales, who was like a big time slugger before he got hurt. He was really never the same. He bounced around to a lot of teams after he was celebrating a walk-off home run, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
Broke
his leg on home plate.
There was another player, and maybe you'll remember it, that kind of did the whole Mark Canseco, Mark McGuire forearm thing, and did it too hard, and either broke a tendon or broke something in his elbow. I don't remember who that was, but that happened also in a celebration. There's been some, freak injuries. Mariano's was a freak injury as well. And so I don't remember who that player was, but
I feel like it might have been Cody Bellinger. I think he like separated
might have
his
been.
shoulder.
Yeah. Separated shoulder. Yes. I think it was Bellinger. Yeah. Well, let's move on to the other really big New York story, right? And that's Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. And I want to take him off the hook a little bit, although I think he's still I had put this on our group chat that he's showing the Jets who he really is when he submits, hey, I want these players to come, to come to the Jets. Now he's saying that he didn't do that or it didn't work out that way. I think the way it probably worked out is they might have asked his opinion, and then it gets a little twisted around. But he was very clear. I'll give him some credit for being upfront and honest with Pat McAfee, and he says, my intention is to play for the Jets. I think now, looking though in hindsight, it may not be the best thing for the Jets that he said that, or for the Packers. But I don't think he cares about that. But it sounds like he really wants to come here. Obviously, the Jets want him here, but the latest is that the Packers want a lot, which is a little bit odd. Well, I don't blame them. You want to do the best for your team, but they pretty much have made it clear they don't want him on the team anymore. So, and the Jets are clear they want him. And so now the Packers have that leverage though. And if this trade doesn't go through, what next? So it's a lot of twists here. I've warmed up to the idea now, because I don't think there's a plan B aside from Lamar Jackson. And I think that's a long shot at best. And so, especially now with, Baker Mayfield going to, who did he go to again? He went to Tampa Bay, right?
Bucks, yeah.
Yeah, he went to the Bucks. Derek Carr, Garoppolo moved. There's not really any other great options here, for the Jets. Their backup signed, I think, with the Dolphins, Mike White.
Yeah.
So what's your whole take on the Aaron Rodgers saga now?
Yeah, I think I hate to say it this way, but it seems like the Jets are kind of trapped too, because yeah, I mean, you could, if let's say the Packers are like, yeah, we want 5 first-round picks, and they're not budging from that, and you're like, no, which I wouldn't either. There really isn't another great option out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you pick up Matt Ryan, who was just cut by the Colts. And there's a reason why he was cut by the Colts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think, well, first of all, I will say, because I said this last week, I think their number one should have been Lamar Jackson anyway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, if you end up signing, like, if you end up getting him to sign with you, you do have to give up 2 first-round picks. But you're also getting a franchise quarterback that you could have potentially for the next 5-10 years.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is going to play, what, maybe 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
Will he pull a Brett Favre and then retire and then go play with the Vikings? Like,
oh my God.
Yes. So, like, I just think it's interesting because also, like, the Packers have made it clear that they want to move on from him. Which I get, because it seems like he's been very much a diva the last couple of years. He's done like the whole, I'm retiring, I'm not retiring.
Yeah.
Talking with Pat McAfee, he's like, oh yeah, I was like 90% retiring, but never mind.
Yep.
And even with the Jets, like, hey, get all of these guys, please.
Yeah.
Whether it's Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Odell potentially too. Which, like, if they can get those guys,
yeah,
more power to the Jets. Get all the weapons that Rodgers wants.
Yeah.
But also, like, I think it's hard because, like, you look at because it seems like in the NFL, you usually get like those star quarterbacks. They're like known for being with a team, and then they end up with a random team at the end. I think Brady with the Bucks, Peyton Manning with the Broncos, guys like that, like Joe Montana with the Chiefs, right?
Chiefs, yeah. Yeah.
Like, you kind of have, like, that seems to be kind of a pattern. But, like, I look at, like, Brady, Matthew Stafford, when they were traded, they went to a team that, like, you plug in the quarterback and, like, they are the title favorites.
Right.
Like,
right.
No shade at all, but Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets. I don't think they're still the title favorites.
Well, because
they might be the best.
No, I'm with you, because you have and it's coming from a Jet fan. You still got to get through Buffalo. You still got to get through Kansas City. You still got to get through Cincinnati. I think all 3 of those teams, are just outstanding. But go ahead.
But yeah, like, that I think is like the biggest concern, because, like, I could totally see, let's say the Jets finish 10-7, make the playoffs, which would be great. But, like, let's say they get demolished in the divisional round. Like, they make the wild card round, they win, they get killed in the divisional round. You know how much Aaron Rodgers is going to take heat from the New York Jet fans? It's going to be crazy.
He has no idea.
Also,
yeah, he has no idea.
And, like, he's, like you said a couple times, he is very thin-skinned. Yeah. I think worse than, like, a Kevin Durant or a Kyrie Irving. Like, it's not going to take much for him to get mad and clap back. And New York fans don't like that.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how that plays out long term.
Yeah.
But also, I think, because also I'd seen this. So, quarterback rating for guys that threw 175 passes or more last year. The bottom 3 guys are guys that you're familiar with: Joe Flacco, Mike White, and Zach Wilson.
Oof.
Like, the Jets have had very not great quarterback play. Not even last year, but, like, over like several years.
It's
So
been a
like
long
having a
time.
franchise
Yeah.
quarterback that like
Yeah.
has the potential, like he's 2 years removed from winning the MVP. And I
Yeah.
think with that in mind, it's like, okay, like we can make this work. We can make it happen.
Yeah. Well, you put a great quarterback like him on this team now. Like if you put him on this team 3 years ago, it wouldn't have helped all that much because you didn't have any playmakers. You do now, and you've got a really good young offensive line that'll protect him. You've got and the makings of an excellent defense. And so there's the Jets have some pieces, but you also are in a conference where you've got three of the top teams in the NFL just into one conference. So it is going to be hard. Now, it doesn't mean that anything can happen in one game, you know. That doesn't mean that they can't get to the Super Bowl. We've seen it happen in football before. But it's just it'll be very difficult to get Pat. You got to go through one of those cities at least, right?
Yeah.
If you just look now. I I think you made a great point at the beginning because I think that I was and I apologize, I was looking away for a second. I was trying to see what does Adam Schefter have any specifics on what the Packers are now asking for? And he really doesn't, except that they're asking for a lot. But you said that it would have probably taken it would have definitely taken 2 first-round picks the way they tagged Lamar Jackson to get him. It's probably going to take at least 2 first-round picks here now to get Aaron Rodgers. And now you're mortgaging your future as well. Again, I'm saying all that, and I've accepted the fact that he's probably still going to be our quarterback. I think at this point, I'll go this far that it would be devastating at this point if he's not, because then we're back to Zach Wilson. No shade on Zach Wilson, right? But then we're back to Zach Wilson, and I don't know who else you get. Do you coax Phillip Rivers out of retirement? No. You know, do you pick up Matt Ryan? I listen. I loved Matt Ryan, but I think his days are done. You know, as a quarterback, I don't see anybody else that you can plug in here except Lamar Jackson. It would all come back to him, and I just don't think he's going to be dangling out there for much longer. I really think either Indianapolis. I think that was the big rumor, right, this week, that Indianapolis will put together a package that there's no way Baltimore would match. There's some clever teams out there that are probably figuring out how can we manipulate his salary and make him the highest paid player in the NFL, and make Baltimore not match it. So,
Yeah.
I, I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Looks like you found something there.
Yeah. The only other, like, there's a couple quarterbacks that be interesting, but also I don't know if they would be great, especially for the Jets, because like Jets have a defensive head coach.
Yeah.
Because I mean he's 30 years old, so he might be decent. Carson Wentz. Also 30 years old, Teddy Bridgewater. But like
Yeah.
both of those guys are good backups.
Yeah. I'd probably take a flyer more on Carson Wentz than I would on Bridgewater. I mean, Bridgewater, I hated when they got rid of him when they had him in preseason a few years back, because I thought that he would have been a good backup, at the time for Zach Wilson, right? Or maybe it was a little bit before that. But Wentz he's been through the ringer, and maybe he needs a shot here. But I think he needs a team to commit to him long. I don't think it's going to be a team that commits to him long term. But I think if the Jets went to him, if there's, I hate to say, if there's nobody else, if just went to him and said, yeah, not only we want you for this year, but we want you for a few years. We want you to be our quarterback. He certainly showed flashes and has the talent. Bridgewater, unfortunately, I mean, the injuries got to him. His NFL career started off great, and he just, the injuries in Minnesota. I mean, he was a great college quarterback. I believe he was at Louisville before Lamar Jackson. And he proved that he could play in the NFL, but I think the injuries kind of wiped him out a little bit. I mean, a choice between the two, I would probably go with Carson Wentz. Let me ask you this last question. We'll move on to the tournament. Um, what happens? We've talked about what happens with the Jets, right? If this trade doesn't go through, what happens to Aaron Rodgers if this trade doesn't go through? What do you think he does?
I think he retires.
Yeah, yeah,
Because like at this point, I mean, the Packers really don't want him, but it seems like he would love to go back to the Packers. But
yeah,
I think at this point they're like, we've moved on.
yeah.
Um, which I think also makes it kind of weird that like they haven't just said, okay, like let's get this guy out of here, let's get Jordan Love acclimated and everything like that. Um, but I think if it comes down to like the Jets and Packers can't make a deal, I think he would just retire.
Wow.
Um, but it's interesting because I've read a couple times that they might be just waiting until the draft, so like they can like kind of
Yeah,
stack picks afterwards. But still, like
yeah,
to me, that would be kind of dumb because it like let's say you get the Jets first round pick this year, like it's a guy that can help you this year as opposed to next year.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this is really, really fascinating because let's put this in perspective, Kenny. If Aaron Rodgers retired, which I don't disagree with that, he'd be walking away from $110 million guaranteed, right? He defaults on that, right? His last 2 years of the 2 years that he signed with the Packers, he's got still 2 more years on his contract, which the Jets would inherit, and then the Jets could maybe rework once they have him in the fold if they needed to. But if he retired, he'd be walking away from all that, and I just that but at this point, it would be so. Now, I think the Packer fans would welcome him back with open arms. I don't think there'd be an issue on opening day, opening night, whatever. With him, getting booed or whatever. I think the Packer fans would be relieved. Um, but boy, oh boy, this is fascinating. And it's really kind of dominated the headlines here almost every day. This is what people are talking about. But now I think people are getting tired of it. Hey, let's bring this guy into the fold here. Why is this taking so long? And it doesn't sound like it's on him now. So, I mean, he was pretty clear. Maybe he shouldn't have said that, but he was pretty clear. All right, let's spend some time on the tournament. And, this is now par for the course. Every year, there's going to be, every once in a while, you get a tournament that's, the top teams get in. And I think it's only one time, though, right? That the first four seeds, the top seeds have gotten in, all four of them. I think it's only one time in history. So that chances are that one of them is probably going to get picked off. I want to hear your take on day one and who you like going forward. And then, one other story developing with the injury to Sasser, who is the best player on Houston, being taken out in the second half. And it looks like he may not play in the next game, which would affect them big time. And then I do want to get into Alabama, which I think is going to be an unfolding story. But what's your overall take here, and what are you looking forward to as we go forward through this weekend?
Well, I'll start with it seems like there's always that one bracket where you're like, man, like is any good team gonna make it in there? It's already shaping up to be the South.
It's the South, yeah,
Arizona getting knocked off by Princeton.
yeah,
Which I saw Arizona's now the first team to lose twice to a 15 seed in team
yeah,
history.
yeah,
Another interesting thing. So obviously Virginia also, those are the two big upsets, and that one
yeah.
was a crazy ending too.
Yes, yeah. That was a big 3-pointer that guy hit for Furman,
Yeah.
right? Wow, yeah.
It's actually 5 years ago to the day that number one Virginia was upset by 16. Was it UMBC? Do I have that right?
I think so. Yeah. Wow.
Yes, 5 years ago to the
Wow.
day.
Wow.
So neither of those teams having great luck there.
Yeah.
As far as like who I like, I'm gonna go a little bit with my friend Jordan who went to Purdue. I'm gonna just go on the Purdue train, the Boilermaker train. But honestly, like I can't say I've watched a ton of college basketball this year, so I
Yeah.
can't be like, oh well, this is the reasons. The Houston injury kind of makes me think that maybe they're that one seed most likely to get picked off.
Yeah.
Whether that is to Auburn or like Indiana or Miami or someone like that.
He's become a great coach, Kelvin Sampson. though.
Yeah.
He may figure this out. He's stepped up at a late stage here in his career. And he went through a lot because the NCAA pretty much kicked him out in Oklahoma. And he coached, if I remember right, the Blake Griffin teams there. And he had, there were a lot of violations, and he toiled around as an NBA assistant for a little while, and Houston giving him a shot here. So it's and they've been to what, the Final Four the last 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Quentin
Yeah, they've been
Grimes, our
good.
guy, it was on that team a few years ago. Um, so I don't know, but I agree with you. They could get picked off here, right, as the number 1 seed.
Um, what I would love, because their local team, would be Kent State knocking them off. Now that would mean that they would
Wow.
be on quite the run.
Yes.
But Kent State being in there is fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. So you're liking Purdue, and you're liking Houston to get picked off. And Zach Edey is the big player on Purdue, right? And boy, he looks NBA ready. He's got some moves and in the paint. It's going to be hard for any team to stop him, and I don't know if I remember looking back at it. I didn't look at it yesterday, but that region that they're in is not. I didn't see a team that could pick them off.
Yeah, I got it up here. Like, Marquette's the number 2,
Yeah,
Kansas State 3, Tennessee 4, Duke 5.
yeah.
I mean, does Duke make that type of a pick off? Because
Hey, they looked good yesterday. I mean, Duke looked really good yesterday. They might. I think Marquette is very interesting. Their coach is, and he has hair now. He was the coach of VCU, and then he went to Texas. And I was Shaka Smart.
That's right. Yeah.
I was surprised that he had left Texas. I wasn't surprised that he left VCU. I think we all probably anticipated that he was looking for bigger and better things. But I was really surprised when he left Texas to go to Marquette. But he's got them. I mean, they are a really good team. They've got 2 or 3, I think, just like I said that last few years about Baylor. They had 2 or 3 guys that were ready for the NBA, and sure enough, they're in the NBA now. I think Marquette has a couple of guys ready for the NBA. They sort of look like an NBA team, and he's always been a good coach.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, if it comes down to Marquette, Purdue, which it almost never does, right? 1 and 2 in the regions, it's hard. One of them will get picked off, but that's probably the likely team, to pick them off. Purdue is very good with a great player. And
yeah,
we've seen it over the years, right, Kenny? This could be that great players coming out party, where now it's like, because I don't think a ton of people, if you said Zach Edey, would know who he is. But I think, if he shines here in these, was it 6 games or so that it would take to win the championship? If he shines here, then people will definitely know him. Think Karl Anthony Towns, and we could probably go on and on with a lot
Jimmer
of
Fredette.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what else you got? Who else are you looking at as? Is there anybody? And here's a word that they're purposely not saying much anymore. Well, it's 2 words, I guess, or is it 1 word? Mid-major. You haven't heard that much in the last couple of years. Oh, we got the mid-major, And I read a little article that they've been trying to tell them to take that out of their vocabulary, because what really is a mid-major, Yeah. It's been interesting. You don't hear them say that too much. Like, you didn't say, okay, Arizona got upset by mid-major Princeton, which I don't know if Princeton would be considered a mid-major. It's certainly not a major conference, that they're in. What other team are you looking at that maybe can make a deep run here that we don't know?
I don't know. Like, if we're talking mid-major, I don't know. Creighton kind of pops out to me. I don't know if they'd be considered
Yeah.
I think they're considered a mid-major, right?
Yeah. I'm sure they are. Yes. Yeah. Mid-major. Yes. Now look up. You look it up real quick. Who's Creighton's coach? I'm almost sure that they've got a very interesting coach who their head coach is. and then we're going to shift over and talk a little bit about what I think is going to slowly become the story of the tournament. Who's their coach?
Greg McDermott, is that like
Yeah,
Doug
yeah,
McDermott's
yes. Okay,
brother?
I thought
Dad?
so. Yeah. So his brother, right? That's his brother, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Doug McDermott, right, is the player that was on the Knicks that was traded for Carmelo. Enes Kanter, and well, it's not Enes
Oh,
Kanter anymore.
oh no,
Uh,
he's the father of
oh,
Doug
he's their
McDermott.
dad. Okay, because
Yeah.
he's got a brother, I think that's a coach as well. But he's their dad, and but Creighton every year seems to make some noise in the tournament, and they always seem to have a pretty good record, and that's where Doug McDermott played, if I'm not mistaken. I'll give you another quick trivia on Creighton years ago where they got put on the map. Um, the Knicks had Willis Reed as their coach for a couple of years. He wasn't very successful. He succeeded Red Holtzman, and they brought Holtzman back after they fired Willis Reed, which was very hard. You know, just like Patrick Ewing, you know, getting fired by Georgetown. It's hard when you're an icon at that place. But Willis Reed then didn't, you know, give up. He went to coach in college. He coached at Creighton for several years, and they became actually really good. And then I think he coached with the Nets for a while. Didn't have much success back in the NBA. But anyway, all right. So Creighton, you heard it. It's on video. So Creighton, if they make a run here, you said it first. That's an interesting one. I'm fast.
Well,
Oh,
I
go
also
ahead.
said Kent State just in case.
Penn
I know
State.
Kent State.
Oh, Kent State.
I
Okay.
gotta stay local.
Okay. And Rutgers, man, got bumped in the NIT in the first round. You know, Rutgers, who I thought should have been in the tournament, but they got beat in the first round there. North Carolina, our buddy Mike, we should have him back on at some point. They didn't make the tournament this year. I was stunned. I guess I wasn't stunned because their record wasn't that great, but I thought just on the name alone they would put them in. You know, but I want to talk about Alabama real quick, and I think that this is going to be a fascinating story, not in a good way, but a fascinating story as we go on, because I'd like to see how CBS and you know, and they have a lot of the TNT team there, right? Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith. I don't think Shaq does it anymore, but Ernie Johnson, obviously, him and Greg Gumbel. Clark Kellogg has always been pretty outspoken. I want to see how they handle this, because Greg Gumbel took a little bit of heat saying that they sidestepped the controversy, and you know, put it back in perspective. 2 months ago, a lady was a 23-year-old mother of a 5-year-old was shot and killed, and whether we like to hear it or not, somehow, some way, their best player, one of the best players in the nation, I don't think he'll win the Wooden Award now, but one of the best players in the country, somehow, some way, is mixed up in this. Whether, you know, he gave the gun, or was it his gun? Was it the other guy's gun? And one of their other players is sitting in jail right now, you know, for this, although he also didn't pull the trigger. It was someone else. There was rumors that it was a third player that also was at the scene. He's totally denying it. They haven't, you know, we've gone through the story, so we don't have to go through all the details. Their coach hasn't handled it well. They had the whole pat down thing that they were doing as in pregame. Nonetheless, it really takes away what's been a feel good story, because Alabama, more known obviously for football. I don't know that I think you might have looked that up before. I don't think the college basketball team has ever been to the Final Four. This has turned into what was a feel good story first part of the year to just this awful tragedy, and Brandon Miller's still playing, and that upsets a lot of people. So the article I sent you, I thought, was so well written. The writer said that it's gonna be hard to root for Alabama as they go forward, and it's just a weird feeling that this is a team that is probably going to make a very deep run in the tournament here, that there's just this cloud hanging over. And I don't remember a time like this, you know, not with a story like this that has to do with a murder. So I'm fascinated to see how this unfolds. And you know, as Alabama, I mean, they looked powerful yesterday. But I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on, will this become like the number one story in the tournament. And to me, what gets unfortunate is that the teams like the team from New Jersey last year that made the deep run, we've seen it over the years, whether it was George Mason or Butler, those are the teams that you love to have. Gordon Hayward was another one that no one knew until, he carries his team to the Final Four, and those are the stories that you just love to come out. I think if Alabama makes this deep run, people will not talk about, Brandon Miller getting 20 points and 10 rebounds in, a Sweet 16 game. They'll talk about, man, why is he playing if he was involved in this murder? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you had said it before we got on, and I'll fully agree. I think if say play Maryland tomorrow, if they beat Maryland, I think it'll become much more of a story. I think if they lose, it'll kind of be like, it is what it is. But like Alabama makes the Final Four, makes the Elite Eight, it's going to be something that kind of just hovers over everything. Because I think what's so bizarre is like usually with any type of situation like this, like either there's a resolution already or the player is nowhere near the team. But it kind of feels like, now correct me if I'm wrong, it kind of feels like they're like, well, he's so good and our program is struggling, so let's keep him in so that we could stay in as long as we can.
That's
Now,
what it feels like, right?
yeah, like let's say Brandon Miller was on Duke or Kentucky or North Carolina and the same thing was happening, I feel like he would be gone. I feel like he wouldn't be anywhere near the team. But
You
like,
said something that a lot of people really, really feel, that an experience like a Roy Williams. I know we're going to name guys that aren't, that retired, but Coach K, Roy Williams, but even, Calipari. I don't think Calipari would have kept him on the team. No way.
Jim Boeheim, who just
Jim
retired as
Boeheim.
well.
Oh, forget it. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, because I feel like maybe that's part of what's going on. And I feel like that adds a whole bunch of different layers. Because, like, first of all, you have a guy that's, whether he's directly involved or not, is tied to a murder. And he's still playing. Like, it kind of feels like you're using him for the money. And that ties into the whole NIL thing, and like, should players get paid and all that stuff. But it just kind of seems bizarre. And I'm wondering, like, I think what's also kind of surprising, and maybe the NCAA doesn't have the authority to do anything about it, but I'm surprised they haven't stepped in as well. Like you said, I'd be surprised if he actually won the Wooden Award at this point. But like, he is one of the best players in the country. And like, I would assume he's going to declare for the NBA draft. But like, if you are, say, because obviously the number one guy this year in the NBA draft is going to be Victor Wembanyama, or however you pronounce his name. Like,
Right.
he's going to
Definitely.
be,
Yeah.
everyone's tanking for him. But like, let's say he goes fifth, like a team, say, like Orlando. Do you take a shot on him? Do you say, well, hopefully everything will kind of go away? I don't know. Because we've seen it sometimes where it's like, there's a lot of like weird legal issues, and then there's like nothing. I mean, Baker Mayfield wasn't involved in a murder, but like Baker Mayfield had some stuff, and like it really had, like, he's had other issues aside from that.
Yeah.
It hasn't been like legal issues.
Yeah.
But like also you never know, because you look at John Morant, he didn't have any legal issues, and then all of a sudden all this stuff has happened. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It'll be interesting, but I think it will kind of become the story of the tournament. Like, let's say Alabama wins it, it's just gonna feel weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's gonna feel like there's, like, I could see even people going as far as protesting. I don't know if it'll actually get to that point, and who knows?
I read something yesterday.
Or someone.
Yeah, no, I read something yesterday that there you could see protests at the Final Four. I mean, how do you think CBS is going to handle it?
I think, like I said, I think if they move on to the Sweet 16, they got to address it. Whether it's trying to get like a sit down interview with him before the game on whatever that would be, Thursday or Friday.
Mm-hmm.
whether it's just like Jim Nantz kind of saying like, yeah, like he's involved in all this legal stuff, but like we're still kind of waiting or something. Like I think it would be wrong for them to stay silent on it. Because like you said,
Yeah.
the coach has been awful with it. The pat down thing to me, like not only is there like a lot of like racial undertones to me with that, but like also like it's just kind of weird. And when you got guys involved and stuff, it just I don't know. The whole
Yeah.
thing just seems bizarre. And
It,
it takes away from a great story, like you said.
yeah, it really does. It would be a big miss to your point, right? I think it would be a big miss if CBS they have probably the most outspoken, thoughtful commentator sitting right there on their panel in Charles Barkley. And they also have Kenny Smith. And they also have Clark Kellogg, who probably, in my eyes, this is just my opinion, just a notch below Barkley. I think Barkley's the best at really speaking his mind and saying things and really not caring about what anybody else, thinks about it. But he's very also thoughtful in his comments, but very, very strong. And if they don't just turn it over to him and let him talk about this for 3 to 5 minutes or whatever, I think it'll be a big miss. And I don't think Ernie Johnson will let that happen. He's always been really good when there's anything in the NBA. I mean, you just if you just Google what Charles Barkley's take, and we'll talk about John in a second, has been on John Morant. I mean, it's a little different than what everybody else is kind of saying, but it's very much to the point. So I'm fascinated to hear what him and Kenny Smith, Candace Parker's on there as well. And from a woman's perspective, I think it would be great to hear from her. And she's been very outspoken as well on a lot of things. So I think though that CBS has gotta hit it head on. Greg Gumbel is not the guy to do that. He's not a hard news guy. Greg Gumbel's been great for years. And so I think unfairly a little bit, right? He probably didn't know what to say. Sidestepped, yeah, that probably wasn't the right thing to say, but I'm not gonna, kill him for that. So it would be almost like Jim Nantz sitting there and saying it. Those guys aren't gonna give hard opinion. They're not paid to do that anyway, and neither really is Ernie Johnson. But Ernie Johnson does the best, I think. This was why the TNT show is the best out there by far. I think pregame and halftime and everything, because he does such a great job of pulling the opinions out of, the guys that he has there. I just hope it's not a stain on this tournament, but it feels like it's going to be. It really does. And I think that you brought up a great point. I think that their coach, his inexperience here, really shows in this situation, because there is no way that any of the coaches that we named, and we probably could name 5 or 10 more, the boosters would have came in. Bill Self maybe is another one that we can name, but the boosters would probably come in and say, no, you got to leave him on the court. He's like, absolutely not. I don't care. He's not playing, until this is all cleared up. And it's a shame. It's a shame that this happened to this young man. It's a shame that this happened to his program, but most of all, it's an absolute tragedy that it happened to this young lady. Let's move to John Morant. By the way, before we get off that, Jim Nantz, we mentioned this a few weeks ago. This is his last tournament. You gonna miss him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the last time we talked about it, it just kind of feels like it's a big game when you hear Jim Nantz. Kind of the same way I had mentioned with like Tim McCarver a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
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 It's a big game when you hear that voice on there.
Yeah. Hello, friends. It's Jim Nantz, right? That's his kind of signature. I think he's just done a spectacular job with the tournament, and they got it right with this team now too, with Bill Rafferty and Grant Hill. They're a really good listen. Because Rafferty is kind of the older guy who just loves college basketball, and he's got and all these little things he says. And Grant Hill is a younger guy, but what he represents with college basketball in the 90s with Duke and the great career he had, they've become a really, really good team. But our guy who we watched from the beginning, or listened to from the beginning years ago on FAN, Ian Eagle, will be stepping in to do the play-by-play. I was surprised that Kevin Harlan didn't get the shot, at doing that. I like it. A lot of people don't like Kevin Harlan because he screams, but I love his excitement, just like we always loved Gus Johnson. Is he back on this year, Gus Johnson?
I don't know. I
Yeah,
haven't heard him because he does
he
Fox,
does
right?
Fox. Yeah, but they brought him last year to do a few games. Those contracts now are a lot looser than they used to be. You see people on other net. Look at Michael Strahan. How many networks is he on? So they, I know they had him there last year. That'd be interesting to see if he's there this year. But outside of Gus Johnson, I think Kevin Harlan gets me. I like his energy and his passion. All right, let's jump to John Morant. So he got an 8-game suspension. He could come back on Monday. There's no word really if he is coming back. I sent you an article that looked even worse, where there's cash all over. It was like $50,000 all over the floor in this place, and he's just giving away $50,000 in this strip club. And again, he's apologized. He had a sit down with Jalen Rose, which if you haven't watched that, it's an interesting conversation that he had. I walked away with the feeling that this is a young man that's a little bit lost, that probably doesn't want to be, is very uncomfortable in the situation that he's in right now. But what are your thoughts on the suspension and the way forward here for John Morant and Memphis?
Um, I think the suspension is interesting. I think 8 games it kind of seems like it's like hey, you did something wrong. And I think it's kind of one of those also like, you're lucky we didn't find out anything more. Because to me, I think they had every right to suspend him for 50. Because that was a big problem. I think back in like the early 2000s, the whole Ron Artest, Ben Wallace fight, and everything like that, where like the NBA was concerned about that reputation of like their players being like these really bad guys. And then obviously the Gilbert Arenas gun situation was the bigger one, and he got killed for it.
Yeah.
No pun intended there.
Yeah.
But I think that from what it seems like, if they wanted to, they could probably have suspended him for 50. But I think they didn't have enough evidence to prove that he had the gun on there. I think John Morant has realized that he's really messed up, and it seems like he really wants to get help, which I think is excellent. Because hey, we all make mistakes. Guy's in his early 20s and like is just walking into $200 million. Like, that's a big deal. Now, should he be dropping 50,000 at a strip club after a loss? Probably not. Because like it's one thing. Because like I'd seen, I think it was Stephen A. Smith that had said it, that like it kind of seems like a little bit of an invasion of privacy, showing like all that cash on the floor. But also at the same time, why are you putting yourself in that situation?
Somebody's taking pictures and somebody's going to send those pictures out. Come on, man. In this day and age, everyone has a cell phone and with a camera. Come on,
Yeah, so I think that's one of the hard things with like social media. I mean, everyone's taking photos nowadays anyway.
Yeah.
But also like it just looks bad because like you had a bad loss the night before, and like is that how you're like dealing with it? Is that like your coping mechanism, or is that just like, well, like it just looks bad, kind of like when James Harden, when he was in Houston, like after they had lost the playoff game and he's like hitting up all these strip clubs, like it just looks bad for you as a player. It kind of seems like you don't care.
Yeah.
But I think it's good for him, like, to kind of get back into the fold. He gets back in on Monday. Memphis still has a shot at the title. Like, I don't know if they'll win it because there's been a lot going on, and they've
hung in there though. Yeah, they've hung in there with him out. They didn't go in the tank there, so they've hung in there. I think that, and none of us are psychoanalysts, right? But it almost is like he wanted to live a lifestyle that he didn't have, that because he didn't grow up like that. And so it's almost like, hey, I want to see what that lifestyle is kind of like, I can just put $50,000 in cash on the floor, and all these ladies are going to do whatever I want them to do. And people are going to do whatever, whatever I want them to do. You're right. He dodged it though, because if they could prove that he transported that gun on a team plane, he'd be gone for 50 games easily.
Yeah.
But there's a difference in leadership, real quick. I think in the NBA, right? And then we'll get to two lightning quick stories here. But there's a difference in the leadership, right, with Adam Silver and David Stern. And I think Adam Silver is a really smart guy, and the NBA thrives under him. But I saw it, Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon said, if that was David Stern, this happened 3-4 weeks ago almost now. They said John Morant would have been in his office the next day, because Gilbert Arenas was in David Stern's office the next day after this came out, what had happened. And several players, over the years, Stern jumped on it right away and had to hear firsthand. Morant this was the first time Silver even, met with him, just a few days ago. So maybe that also has to do with the penalty. I think the penalty, if they can't prove that he, transported that weapon, I think the penalty probably fits, but I think that he's on thin ice, man. If something happens with him again, he's going to be gone for a significant amount of time, much more than 9 games, 8 games or whatever it was, so. All right. Trevor Bauer signed with a team in Japan. Obviously, no major league team wanted to take a shot on him. And you and I talked about that real quick last week, that this would have been the time to bring him in, right? Spring training, and let's see what he has. No one, I don't think anybody called him. And so your thoughts on him signing with Japan?
I'll say real quick, I think the MLB is kind of blackballing him a little bit. Right or wrong, that's up to you to decide.
Yep.
Because I look at the Yankees, I look at the Mets, Jose Quintana is going to be out for a while. The Yankees lost Montas and Rodon starting the year on the IL.
Yep.
I mean, I'm still not sold that Bauer is still a Cy Young caliber guy. He's missed almost 2 years, but I mean, one of these teams would have at least taken a flyer on him. I think he's a little blackball, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. At some point, maybe in our baseball preview, we could probably dig into a little bit more whether now it's fair or not. I don't know. I'm feeling I'm just very indifferent now, on what's happened to him, and trying to not be judgy, on what he did. But you sent what's really interesting as baseball is getting ready to kick off. We'll do our preview next week. Diamond Sports Network. What's happening with them?
So they filed for bankruptcy after acquiring all of the local Fox Sports broadcasts. So they own the rights to 42 different professional sports teams among NFL, NBA, NHL, and MLB. So they say right now that they're going to continue to air their games, but this could be really big. Baseball is going within the next few days, I believe it's today, to try to regain the rights to their broadcast that they've lost, which I believe is 14 different teams, including local team here, the Guardians. So we'll kind of see what happens. They said that if they can't air the games, baseball will air them for free in the local markets on their streaming devices. So
wow. And it's 14 teams, you said it affects 14 markets?
14 baseball teams. 42 teams. Overall.
Okay. Wow. And that didn't make a big story, but that's a big story. Yeah, because again, you get into the dog days of summer, you expect to turn on and see your team, and it shouldn't be hard. And wow. You got to keep us updated on that one. All right, ready for some inspiration?
Yeah.
All right, I will kick us off real quick. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't remember him at UCLA, but he won 3 championships at UCLA. Back then, freshmen couldn't play. So otherwise he would have won 4. But and also you couldn't leave college earlier, like you can now. Hardship. A year or 2 later, they had what they called you apply for hardship, and you could leave after your 3rd year or whatever, to go to the NBA. But otherwise he would have won more. He went to the finals 10 times, and he won 6. He was 6-4 in the finals. So a couple of those were with the Bucks. I believe 8 of them were with the Lakers. Unbelievable. He has actually 6 MVPs. He won the MVP 6 times. So Kareem was a great player, a little bit of a surly guy when he was, a player. Didn't speak much to the media. I think Magic Johnson reinvigorated his career. Second part of his career with the Lakers was great, but I read something of what he did because he's become sort of kind of a thoughtful writer now. He writes about issues and stuff like that, and they're really pretty much thought out, pretty well thought out. So I read the other day that he sold 4 of his championship rings. Again, he has 6. I don't know if he maybe sold the other 2 or 4, but he sold 4. Sold 3 of his MVP trophies, and a bunch of other things, and it netted him $2.8 million. And he didn't take it and put it in his pocket. He donated every single penny to youth programs. He spread it out throughout the country, all different youth programs. And what he said, I thought was so inspirational. He said, these things aren't doing any good sitting on my shelf. People want good money for this. I'm going to take that money and I'm going to invest it in the future of this country. And I thought that was just outstanding. Doesn't sound like Kareem from when I knew him back in his playing days, but certainly the generosity there, is just spectacular. So that was very inspirational for me this week. What you got, man?
Well, he didn't give any to us, but I'll
he didn't give anything to us. Yeah. He didn't give anything to your youth program. Yeah.
Well, I have 2 very quick, both World Baseball Classic related. So Duque Hebert, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, for Nicaragua, struck out the side. But listen to the guys he struck out. He struck out Julio Rodriguez, Rafael Devers, and Juan Soto, which is amazing. Most people can't do that, say, in an all-star game.
No, that's amazing. Yeah.
So immediately after the game, he signs a minor league contract with the Detroit Tigers, which a scout was there and saw it. So I know there's a lot of controversy, but that's one of the positives. Yeah. Also, Freddie Freeman was asked why he played for Team Canada, and he gave a very interesting, and I'll have to send you the video I'd seen. But basically, both of his parents were born in Canada. His mom passed away when he was 10 years old from skin cancer. So he sees it as a way to honor her. And he says, and he went into a lot of some of the daily routines that he does to honor her memory. Such as, since she died from skin cancer, he always wears sleeves. Kind of some of the stuff that he wears, he does a lot of things to remember her. And he felt like going and being a part of Team Canada was one of the ways that he can honor her memory. So I thought that was really cool.
Very cool. I didn't know. I thought I read that. I was like, Freddie Freeman's Canadian? I thought I saw that he was playing for Canada, but that makes so much sense. And God bless him that he's honoring his mom. That is awesome. That is awesome. All right, bud. Good stuff for this week, man. We'll be back. We got another interview next week, and we actually have one coming out on Monday, right? Great interview here on the show. So continue to follow us. And we've got some great guests coming up. So, Kenny, go ahead. Take us home, man.
Kenny Squared N.
Kenny?
With sports on the positive tip. We'll see you guys next week.
Absolutely.